How's it going, guys?
Good. How are you?
I'm old and fat, and I've been forced to realize that more and more these last few days. So it's been fun. It's been a good time. So yeah, sorry we've been gone for a while. Haven't had class in a minute. But again, part of being old and fat is that it turns out if you move in a just even remotely unusual way, you can basically cripple yourself. So that is what I learned over this last week. Is I literally went to move a ladder. I went to pick up a ladder and move it, and my back went, no, no, we're not going to do that. And it decided to take its vengeance on me for several days. And so, yeah, so it was a good time. It was a lot of fun. I'm much better now, so that's a positive. But then also at the same time, I got a house full of sick people, so just can't win. Just cannot win. So we'll get back up on the horse though, and we'll do what we need to do. So thanks for bearing with me. Appreciate it, guys. Appreciate not inundating me with emails of, what's going on? What can't I do? So I appreciate you guys being adults. That was nice of you. It's a rare thing to find these days. So we're moving on now to chapter 7. Again, what would be chapter 7 if you were using the book, and that is the impact of social media. Where we left off last time was talking about interactive media and what interactive media is, what are the issues concerning interactive media, and how it's kind of not really. We didn't really do a timeline thing for interactive media, but rather just kind of the bigger, the top level understanding of what interactive media is. For the impact of social media, we are going to go a little bit back into the history, but it's not a very deep history, right? We're not talking, a very long time. This is all stuff that has happened within my lifetime. And for some of you, it has predominantly happened within your lifetime, just a little bit older than you. But before we get into the kind of the history of social media and how we got to where we are today, what is social media? What is it when we say social media? Because I found that a lot of people kind of conflate interactive media with social media, and there's definitely a lot of overlap. You can have quite a few media platforms that are both interactive and social, but you can also have platforms that are just interactive. Social media requires interactive media, it requires interactivity, but social media goes a step further. Specifically, social media is the use of technology combined with social interaction to create or co-create value, right? So how does that differ from interactive media, right? Social media, yes, it uses technology with social interaction, just like interactive media does. But social media does it in that's the whole point. The interaction is the point, right? It creates or co-creates value through the interaction. With interactive media, the media exists whether you interact with it or not, right? Think of it as the difference between, Instagram and a website. CNN.com is interactive media, whereas, Instagram is social media. CNN.com is putting up their articles. They're putting up their content, whether or not you interact with it or not, right? Social media, that content only exists for the interaction. It exists for somebody to respond to it. And so that's the difference between social media and interactive media. And again, social media is naturally interactive. It is the whole premise here is that it's mediated through technology to convey to a larger audience. But it takes a very different approach in terms of what's the point, right? Oh, Adam, you sweet summer child, you innocent boy, you're really asking me about my thoughts on current politics? Is that playing with fire? That is, okay, we can wait. All right, we'll wait. I will rant and rave for hours, but let's get through the class stuff first, and then you can choose if you want to listen to me rant and rave for hours. Because, oh my god, I have so many thoughts. All right, so social media is the You're kind of upset with it right now. You're kind of upset with it right now. The use of technology combined with interaction to create or co-create value, right? The whole purpose of the post is the engagement, and the value comes from the engagement. Social media is also defined by its dialogic nature. Dialogic meaning it's meant to be a dialogue. It's meant to be a back and forth, which is one of the reasons. It's just one of the things that just drives me absolutely up a wall with a lot of people's use of social media is if you've ever seen somebody say, you know, like, well, this is my Facebook wall. I'll say what I want and I don't want to hear your feedback. Well, then what the fuck are you doing here? Right? Why are you here? Right? If you're posting this because you don't want somebody to respond, what are you doing? What you're in the wrong place, sir. This is a Wendy's. You know, like if you're posting something on Twitter and you're mad that somebody responds, you don't understand what Twitter is. You don't understand the whole point here, right? If you're posting something on a social media interface, but you don't want somebody to reply, get a blog, right? Make a website. Don't engage in a social media channel if you don't want the dialogic communication. That's the whole point. The whole point is to get the feedback. Bunch of sissy ass snowflake. I don't want to hear it. I'm gonna believe what I want to believe, and I don't want anyone to challenge me. Me. I'm a sensitive white person. Another aspect of social media. Another aspect of social media that we need to pay attention to is that it is social production. It is social production, right? What do we mean by social production? It is produced by society. It's produced through social interaction. Your original post, right? Your original tweet, your original post, your original whatever. Yes, that's your thought, but that is not the end of the construction. Right? The point of social media, again, like the dialogic aspect, is that the full idea isn't completed until this is social engagement occurs, right? I don't really have anything to produce until I get engagement. I haven't come up with anything. The whole point of, again, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok is the engagement. It's the allowing other people to add on, refute, engage in some way with the material you're presenting, which again, vastly different from the point of CNN.com, the point of, TMZ.com, right? The point of interactive media is for it to be out there and it to be accessible through technology. The point of social media is conversation, right? The point of social media is that the conversation should be the factor. The conversation should be the unit of measurement, not the post. So how did we get to where we are today, right? How did social media come to where we are today? Believe it or not, it starts way farther back than you probably would have imagined given the current state of social media. It began in 1995 with a website called classmates.com. This website still exists today. Don't bother going to it. It will do you no good. But the point of classmates.com was to make it easier to stay connected with people you went to school with, right? Back in the good old days, class reunions were kind of important, right? People they cared about class reunions, their 10-year, their 15-year, their 20-year reunions. And one of the challenges in that day, right, in 1995 was when people moved, you didn't always keep track of where they went. And it wasn't always easy to find them because, again, this was pre-social media. This was even before the internet was really ubiquitous. Commercial internet wasn't available until 1991. We were still doing dial-up internet. We were still doing pay-by-the-minute internet in 1995. So there weren't a lot of people who were on the internet. There wasn't a lot of internet presence. There wasn't a lot of footprints to find people. So classmates.com was a place where you could go and you could upload your information. You could enter in your name, what high school you went to, what year you graduated, where you are now, your phone number, whatever. And it was used, again, that was the whole point, was so that you could find people you went to school with and connect with them. So classmates.com was not just a repository, right? It wasn't just a place where you could collect names. You could also engage with people on the site. So it was a website that you could go to both find and interact with those people that you may have gone to school with. And in doing so, they inadvertently created the first form of social media. That was not the intent at all, but that is absolutely what classmates.com ended up doing, is it created this proof of concept of social media on a website. In 1999, Black Planet is launched. Black Planet was a social media site dedicated exclusively and entirely to Black men and women engaging with each other. It was a space entirely dedicated to one demographic group being able to interact with each other and find kind of common ground, right? We see that a lot today, right? There are a lot of not social media apps, but social media sites that are dedicated towards a small group, well, not necessarily small, but a dedicated group. And it is exclusive, right? You have 4chan, right, channels that are just about this particular group interacting with each other. And when that's social media in and of itself, right? It's not a whole website, it's just a part of a website. But the idea of social media doesn't have to be open to everybody. Social media outlets can be exclusive, really started with this idea of Black Planet in 1999. In 2002, the website Friendster launched. Friendster was the precursor to the social media that you're familiar with today, right? For most of us, we grew up with the social media approach that kind of Facebook was known for, right? Where, you know, you can post whatever you want, you can post on each other's walls, you can send things to your friend's wall, right? That all started with Friendster, right? Friendster launched that concept in 2002. I actually had a Friendster account in college. Because again, I'm old. And I very clearly remember my girlfriend at the time being like, "Oh, you should check this thing out." And you know, I created a Friendster account, and it was weird. I'll be honest, it was a weird experience because it was so new. It was so bizarre. We didn't know anything like this before, right? I was 22 years old, experiencing social media for the first time. The idea of, you know, like, oh, well, I can see if this person wants to be my friend, even though I've never met them, right? Oh, here's this person I knew 5 years ago. Let me see if they want to connect with me. Oh, here's a story that I think Joe would like, but I want Joe's friends to know that I shared it with him. That was a new way of engaging with people. That was a whole new language for us in 2002. And because of that, if you think back to the 30-year rule we talked about with interactive media, there were early adopters who were really excited about it, but by and large, society was kind of weirded out by it, right? By and large, it was hard to get people to sign on to this service because it just seems so bizarre. Like, why would I go online to talk to people? I just go to the bar, right? There was still that competition from the traditional modes of engagement that a lot of people were reluctant to get engaged with Friendster. In 2003, both MySpace and LinkedIn launch. MySpace was, you know, it was the first Facebook, right? This is where it started getting popular. This is where the idea of social media really starts becoming popular. LinkedIn, still around today, some of you might even have a LinkedIn account, was launched to be social media for the business class, right? LinkedIn is its whole focus, its whole concept is allowing you to use the tools of social media, but for career, right? So you're linking up with people who you either have worked with or would like to work with, or people who are in the same field as you, right? And you can do the things on LinkedIn that you do on Facebook. You can post articles, you can comment on people's things, you know, you can do all of that, but it's much more geared towards job, right? It's geared towards the work environment, whereas MySpace and Friendster were geared towards entirely the personal and private, right? It had nothing to do with work. You could be a completely different person on MySpace than you were in your work life, whereas LinkedIn is kind of meant to cover that work sphere, which again still exists today. LinkedIn is still out there today. In 2004, Facebook, Flickr, and Vimeo all launch, right, in the same year. Flickr, you might not be aware of, some people aren't aware of. Flickr is like the professional Instagram, right? It's a photo sharing website or photo sharing app that allows you to post your videos, or excuse me, post your photos and have other people comment on it. It also allows you to sell your images on Flickr, which is kind of cool. So a lot of photographers use Flickr as a way to both get exposure and sell prints of the work that they do. Vimeo is, well, it's YouTube. It's not actually YouTube, but it's the same concept. Vimeo is a video sharing website that is, again, largely used by professionals. It's largely used by video professionals to both showcase their work and sell their work. There are paid aspects to Vimeo, unlike YouTube, right? YouTube has YouTube Premium, but it's the same content. Vimeo has exclusive content for subscribers, exclusive content for that are only accessible through a paywall. It allows you to sell your video content. So Flickr and Vimeo launched before Instagram and before YouTube, but they were geared more towards the professionals in the field, not the Tom, Dick, and Harry, not the average Joe, right? Whereas Instagram and YouTube are more for everybody, right? They're more of a consumer-based model. Flickr and Vimeo are more of a professionally centered model. Now, Facebook, obviously, probably you're pretty familiar with. You know what Facebook is. When Facebook launched in 2004, it was nothing like it is today. And again, I was an early adopter. I signed on to Facebook when it first launched, because back when it first launched, you had to be a college student and you could only interact with people from your same college, right? So I went to NIU. I could only interact with people from NIU on Facebook. You had to have an NIU email address, and you were only, so, I have friends who went to ISU, or friends who went to Bradley, or friends who went to, University of Iowa. I couldn't interact with them on Facebook. Facebook was kind of segmented by campus, right? So again, very different from what it is today. In fact, I still vividly remember when Facebook announced that they were expanding so that you could now so now you can interact with people on other campuses. And then a little bit later, now you don't even have to be a student, right? Facebook was originally just for college students. And if you've seen the movie The Social Network, which is kind of about the founding of Facebook, it's a pretty good movie, right? But obviously it's a movie, right? It's not intended to be true in all aspects. It's intended to be based on the truth. So there's a lot of dramatization. There's a lot of hyperbole in it, but it's a pretty good telling of the origins of what was the motivation for Mark Zuckerberg.
I'm not going anywhere.
Hey, Trent.
Yeah.
Can you mute your mic, buddy? Yeah. So if you watch The Social Network, really the point of Facebook starting was that Mark Zuckerberg wanted to find a way to rate women on campus. Mark Zuckerberg wanted a way to talk to other people at Harvard about which women were hot. And that's how he started Facebook. It's because he was a shy nerd who was horny. And now it's one of the most powerful forces in all of media. So again, Facebook started with very, very different intents from where it has ended up. But it's important to know in some ways it's come a long way. In other ways, it happened overnight. 2004, God, it was 16 years. It's only taken Facebook 16 years to become this powerhouse of the media industry. In 2005, YouTube finally launches, right? So we get YouTube in 2005. So again, think about how powerful YouTube is. Think about how much influence YouTube has on our daily lives, and realize it's only been out for 15 years. Fun little trivia, the first video uploaded to YouTube was of one of the creators of YouTube going through a zoo. It's like a 15-second clip of him looking at giraffes at a zoo. They uploaded it just to kind of test the system. And it was essentially just a test video. But YouTube kind of took that same concept as Vimeo of anyone can upload their videos to this platform where anybody else can view it and engage with it, interact with those videos. So now you can comment, right? You can post replies, you can subscribe. YouTube became that go-to for the average person to engage with other human beings through a video platform. Because again, Vimeo was not geared towards the average person. It was geared towards the professional. That same year, 2005, News Corp purchases MySpace for $580 million. MySpace launched in 2003. It took 2 years, 2 years to be worth $580 million. Right now, this is a point we should probably kind of explain a little bit. How, what does it mean when we say that it was worth $580 million? Well, one of the first things you learn in a business class is, what determines price? What determines price is how much somebody's willing to pay for it, right? So $580 million is what we call a valuation, right? It doesn't mean that there are $580 million worth of goods or services that MySpace was providing. It's not like walking into a store and buying everything on the shelf, right, that has a set price. MySpace was a concept, right? It was, yes, it's a tangible website, but how do you know what that website is worth? Well, how much is News Corp willing to pay for it? And they decided it was worth $580 million after only 2 years of existing. That's fucking big, right? That is phenomenally impressive. That in that short amount of time, a company determined it was worth that much money. Really what News Corp wanted, though, and MySpace still exists today, believe it or not, right? You can still go to myspace.com, and it's still there. What News Corp really wanted, and ultimately what they ended up doing with MySpace after they purchased it, is they wanted MySpace because it was largely a social network for musicians and for bands, right? Every independent band, every independent music artist in the country had a MySpace page because it was a place where anybody could go and listen to your music and buy your music. Yes, MySpace was a social media site where non-musicians could interact and engage and do all the stuff we want to do with social media. But really where News Corp saw value was in the musical side of it, the music component of the media site. And that is still what they use it for primarily today. You'll still find bands on MySpace, right? You'll still see, performers and unsigned acts on MySpace using that as a way to kind of get their word out. News Corp would be interested in that because News Corp, along with owning Fox, right? News Corp also owns several media or music labels, right? They own several music labels internationally. And so by owning MySpace, that kind of gives them first dibs on upcoming musical talent. And that's really what that $580 million investment was for News Corp, was a way for them to kind of corner the market on musical talent for their music labels. In 2006, Twitter rears its ugly head and ruins America. Twitter launches in 2006. Again, think about how important Twitter is these days. Think about how influential Twitter is in our daily lives. And it's only been around for 14 years. I mean, that's nuts, right? Twitter launches in 2006. The hook for Twitter is that it was app-based. Smartphones were very, 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 where they were increasing in popularity. They weren't quite everywhere yet, but they were definitely increasing in popularity. So number one, Twitter was app-based. And number two, the idea was it was about brevity, right? Originally, you could only send out 180 characters. No, I'm sorry. Originally, it was 120 characters. Excuse me. Originally, it was 120 characters. They later expanded, and now, then you could do 180, and now I think it's up to 220 or something like that. But that was kind of the whole point of Twitter, is like, oh, I can just make snarky comments, right? I can engage with people still. Again, it's social, so I can still reply and all that. But the whole point of Twitter, the popularity of Twitter, what they brought to the market was the idea of snark, right? Of I can make this brief, quick, snarky comment. And the original days, Twitter was largely used for comedy, right? It was largely people testing out comedy material. It's since taken on a very different tone. It is a very, very, very toxic place these days. But it was originally intended to just be a place where people could make snarky comments on the internet. In that same year, Google buys YouTube for $1.65 billion. So, it took 2 years for MySpace to reach a valuation of $580 million. It took 1 year, 1 year for YouTube to build enough steam in the marketplace that Google was willing to spend $1.6 billion for the rights to the website. When you consider how much traffic YouTube sees now, $1.65 billion was a steal, right? YouTube bought them for a discount price when you consider how much money they've made back over the last 14 years. Google is smart. There's just no two ways about it. Google the business, whether you think they're too big, whether you think they're too powerful, whether you think they're unethical, whether you think they're biased, I don't give a shit. They're smart. You have to give Google credit. They saw this early, they knew the potential, and they jumped on that opportunity. And that's not to say that the creators of YouTube, the previous owners of YouTube, didn't also see that potential, but you can't tell me if somebody's waving $1.65 billion in your face, you're not going to take it. So very, very, very business savvy move by Google to snag YouTube that early on in their existence. And then they went and got dumb. They're so smart. And then they launched Google Plus and showed they weren't really that smart. In 2010, Google launched Google Plus as an attempt to compete with Facebook. They wanted to create a social media site that was close to Facebook that would try to steal market share from Facebook. And it just didn't work, as evidenced by the fact that nobody has a Google Plus account. Google actually shut it down. There are two ways you can succeed in business, right, in a crowded marketplace. We talked about this when we talked about Beats by Dre and Apple buying Beats by Dre. One way you can succeed is by building a better product than your competitor. But that takes money, that takes time, that takes resources, that takes investment, and you might not end up making a better product. The other way is by buying your competition. The other way you can succeed in a crowded marketplace is by buying out your competitors, getting large enough that you can afford to buy out the people who are competing with you and just use their products instead, which again is what Apple did with Beats by Dre. They wanted that streaming music algorithm. Rather than, they did the math, Apple sat down and realized it's cheaper to just buy this company who already has this algorithm than to try and create our own. Google Plus looked at that same formula and said, you know what, I bet you we could make our own product better. We could buy a social media site or we could make our own. And they chose to make their own. And they failed miserably. They failed so hard. In 2011, Pinterest and Snapchat both launched. Now we're getting into the stuff that I don't have to explain as much about what it is because you all know. Everyone's heard of Pinterest. Everyone's heard of Snapchat. But again, just kind of pointing out how recent that was. How much those apps proliferated the market and flooded the market in such a short amount of time. In 2013, Vine and Yik Yak both go live. I'm sure you're aware that Vine is no longer. Your generation, for some reason, mourns that. I don't know why. It's like mourning the death of Hitler. Yik Yak is still around. It's just really, 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 really underutilized. For those of you who aren't familiar, Vine was the social media site where you could post 6-second video clips. I have no idea why. For the life, I could live to be 6,000 years old, and I'll never understand what the hell the appeal is of that. Like, what's entertaining about a 6-second? It just all it does is encourage you to be stupid. Look at how stupid I can be in 6 seconds. Like, you're not going to formulate any real thought in 6 seconds. There's not going to be any worthwhile content there. What is you ADD mother? Why? I hate Vine. But that was the point of the platform, was to give kids with ADD other people to hang out with, I guess. Yik Yak was where, Yik Yak's a whole different thing than TikTok. Yik Yak is a social media site that allows you to be a little bitch. Yik Yak is a social media service where you can post completely anonymous statements that are only visible to people in your geographic area, right? So Yik Yak uses geotagging, which is essentially uses the GPS that's built in on your phone to show you what area you're in, right? So you could be in the Freeport Yik Yak, or you could be in the Rockford Yik Yak, or you could be in the, Monroe Yik Yak. And whatever you post there will only be seen by people in that same geo-target range, right? So if you're in Freeport, you go on Yik Yak and you put, this place sucks ass. Only people in Freeport are going to see it, but they're not going to see who wrote it, right? It's anonymous. No one will know who wrote it, and you can respond to it, which is why I say Yik Yak just allowed everybody to be a little bitch, because you could go on there and talk all kinds of shit and no one would know who you were. Yik Yak largely lost popularity because that's all it became. It became just a place for people to go and be a little bitch or buy drugs. Those were the two primary uses of Yik Yak, because that's what you need geo tagged anonymity for, right? I need to know who around me can hook me up with some drugs, and I need somebody around me to know that I don't like them, but without them being able to do anything about it. That's the only reasons you would need the capability to say something anonymously in a geotagged area, right? So again, Vine has gone the way of the dodo, but Yik Yak does still exist. It's just very, very, very underused. In 2014, Musically appears on the scene. Musically is what Vine was, right? Musically was, I should say, what Vine transitioned into. Musically was an app that allowed you to lip sync and choreograph to music, right? So you could pick a song, but not a whole song, just a little snippet, just a few seconds of a song, and you could lip sync to it, and you could dance to it, and you could put effects on it, and you could make your own little 8-second music video. And go figure, the ADD generation loved it. Musically was very successful. But if it was so successful, why isn't it still around? Why are we using the past tense? Well, that's because it got absorbed by TikTok in 2018. Musically and Vine didn't die. They evolved into TikTok. TikTok was a Chinese company, still is a Chinese company, that absorbed Musically. They bought Musically for $800 million in 2018 because Musically wasn't making any money, right? Musically didn't really monetize itself very well. It was popular, but it was a poor business model. And so Chinese-owned TikTok was able to come in and absorb it for a pretty cheap price, really, for what it was, for its reach. And now we have the juggernaut that is TikTok today, right? in current events, right, because everything is changing with social media at all times. In current events, you may have seen that President Trump has threatened on a couple of occasions to shut down TikTok, claiming national security risks. The reason for that is because TikTok is, at least in part, owned by the Chinese government, which all Chinese companies are, right? That's kind of the point, is that China is not a free market system. China is a communist system, so the government owns part of all business. So TikTok is at least partially owned by the Chinese government, and TikTok is able to access all of the data on your phone. So, vis-a-vis, the Chinese government is able to access the information on your phone if you have TikTok. Trump has explained that that is the reason why he wants to ban TikTok. He wants to bar TikTok from the United States. Coincidentally, however, he didn't feel that way until after a bunch of people on TikTok ruined one of his rallies. A bunch of kids on TikTok figured out that they could sabotage his attendance at a rally and caused quite a bit of embarrassment. And then all of a sudden, TikTok is a national security concern. What a coincidence. Is TikTok a national security concern? Sure. What isn't? Everything on your phone is a national security concern, for fuck's sake. It's the internet. That's how this works. Does TikTok pose a special threat to national security? No, absolutely not. And you will not find a single national security expert in the world to verify that, to say that it is a specific threat. So the Trump administration has been trying to coordinate a sale of TikTok. They say that if TikTok's going to continue to operate in the United States, they have to sell to an American company. In specific, the Trump administration is trying to orchestrate a sale to Oracle. Oracle is a very, very, very prominent company in tech. Larry Ellison, who is the chairman of Oracle, is one of the wealthiest men in the world. Oracle is an incredibly leveraged company. They have a shit ton of money. It would make a lot of sense for them to be interested in buying TikTok, except they don't. Oracle works in hardware primarily and software for computer systems for business. It doesn't make a lot of sense for them to get involved in social media purchasing, right? They don't really have any arms or fingers in the social media world right now. So it would be kind of a weird move for them. But we'll see how it plays out, right? It's still all up in the air now, so we'll see what happens. But that is the current state of TikTok, is probably going to be bought by Oracle, but maybe not. It depends on how many other things Trump gets distracted by, right? It's real easy for him to just go, "Ooh, look, a bird," and then he forgets about the whole TikTok thing altogether. And he's got, death on his door at the moment, so that's probably a little distracting. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm weird, but if I had corona, I probably would not care so much about TikTok anymore. I'd probably be focused on the whole breathing thing, but I'm weird. What can I say? I'm an odd person. So, with that being said, Adam, you wanna do anything in particular you're concerned about with current politics, since we're kind of segueing into this right now? It's a good lead in. Just want my opinion on current politics. All right. Okay. Well, all right. Before I say anything more, here's what I am going to say to everybody. Right. I am now taking off my "I'm your teacher" hat. Okay. Class is over. If you don't want to hear my opinions, you don't have to be here. We will pick this up on Friday. We will finish our discussion of social media on Friday. So if you want to hear my opinions, stick around. If you don't want to hear my opinions, you are free to go. Class is over. This is now officially not class time. So I'm going to stop the recording.